project starts from questions of why, how, what, who, when, where about science. So in the email, we discussed the what part. I recommended the review of a history of science and the review of philosophy of science. And I think our meeting is focused on how and the why part. So first, I would emphasize that we need to draw a distinction between science and the philosophy and the religion, and that's kind of like a common sense. And also important, we need to draw a distinction between, let me move this away. We need to draw a distinction between science and pseudoscience, because both publish information in websites, books, texts, journals, periodicals, etc. And both use scientific concepts and terminology. So it is very important that we always keep a guard to make sure that we're working on this area instead of slipping into that area. So the third question I asked in my email was, how do you distinguish science from just self-entertainment? So, and we have this guy, Karl Popper, promoted the idea and accepted by almost all scientific community, the falsifiability as the criteria. So I want to talk about how can we insist in doing real science instead of going back to philosophy. And also, we need to be always open-minded, not so sure, not so made up of our minds. So here, there's a rough guide for spotting bad science. And you can see there are 12 categories here that a lot of us unintentionally falling into one of these categories and still consider ourselves a scientist. So that's my alarm. So reviewing who are the famous or acknowledged scientists, and here is a small collection of them, and many of them you can recognize. And these are the names from 2700 BC all the way to nowadays. So these are the examples of what, when we talk about the science, and we need to also focus on the essence inside the core of the concept of science. First, starting from the idea of a hypothesis at the age of Socrates and Plato. And then this gentleman emphasized the empirical data and the reproducibility. And you all know Francis Bacon emphasized the empiricism and promoted set up the tone for the scientific method. And the term scientist was coined by him, William. So here we got Newton here, who promoted or established the 4 rules, 4 basic rules. Requisite cause or parsimony, first one. Parallel experience or universality, second one. Essence matters or essentiality, third one. Truth unless falsification, or truth equals hypothesis on duty. So, and then science grows into a huge tree of a lot of branches. And you can see this group is what we call natural science. And second group here is what we call social science. And the third group here is what we call logic, formal science. Okay, so I put the cybernetics at the end of this line. So from logic, mathematics, all the way down to linguistics and cybernetics. So three groups, and coming back to the concept, the core of a concept itself, the sanqie means knowledge, to know, to learn, and we do carry a number of assumptions of when we talk about the science. We need evidence-based system knowledge to be developed. We do research, we do learning, we do experimenting, we do experiencing by ourselves. Blend logic with imagination, provide explanation and prediction. And we have Newton's 4 rules. We have Einstein correct Newton's last rule, and supported by Popper and the idea of hypothesis. And we have Maturana suggests the 4-step cycling process. I will draw it later. So at the core of what we call this thing science, Popper says that's problem situation 1, and when you got a problem situation 1, you got a tentative theory, you promote your tentative theory, and you do your error elimination, and then you do your you have your second problem situation. So this goes on and on in a circle. And Maturana reworked this framework more clearly. And what he says is you describe a phenomena called phenomena 1, and then you do explanatory hypothesis as your second step, and you derive a phenomena 2 from your theory, and then you observe to test it. So this circle, I think he listed this in the book, The Tree of Knowledge. He highlighted that it does not rely on reality really. So hypothesis is something we all can have. So this circle is commonly accepted, a more detailed circle of science. If you Google the image about what is science, you frequently will get this cycle. You make an observation, you think of interesting questions, you formulate your hypothesis, you develop testable predictions, and you gather data to test your predictions, and you can go on and on here to refine. Sorry, my mouse is not. My mouse needs to be updated. Let me use this one. Yeah. So anyway, it's a circular process that defines science, and it's widely accepted. Now, this is what I call the image of a judgmental experimentation. You do your observation either to falsify or support your hypothesis. This is the Einstein's idea about the curving light because the curving space. So based on this experiment or based on this observation, he built up our understanding about the space in this kind of image, i.e. the curving light. That's the example. So, and we have this thing called the cybernetics. What's the relationship between cybernetics and the science? Previously, I put it in the in the formal science category. But here, we can have a very simple perception. It's when we talk about the science, we always talk about some kind of natural law that we discover, and also always in the format of one variable equals a function of a number of other variables. So it becomes a causality from A to B. So it's pretty straightforward. But in cybernetics, the difference is you have a circle going back to A. So A causes B, causes C, and then causes A, or A, B, A, or A to itself. So the difference is that you've got a cycling going on here. So they are all potatoes. It's just the difference is straightforward or circular. So I can say that they are actually the same thing. It's just to have this new feature. So second order science is symbolically published in this journal. You all know that actually it's the reason to bring this group together. 6 leading papers, 10 authors, 30 commentary papers. I'm here one of them, but since I involved in this project, I kept thinking questions, and perhaps I think we can have some better term than second order. So the essence of second order science, in my understanding, is Stuart added this dimension, amount of attention paid to the observer, to the previous conception of science. So sort of enlarged into a new territory. But observing, I think, is not possible without the thinking and without the action. So I'm proposing the idea that you are not just an observer. You are observer, thinker, actor. So I call it Autoota, O-T-A. So you are an Autoota, and anyone is an Autoota. Everyone is an Autoota, and we are all Autootas, because we want to use that concept later. So if you are an Autoota, you are participating in the world to build our reality. So here is the simple summary of my conception is, when you have your first version science, you're talking about A causes B. When you have your first version of cybernetics, you're talking about a system in which you have circular causalities. And in the second version of science, you included Autoota, observer, thinker, actor, not just observer. I want to emphasize. The same thing here. When you're talking about the second order cybernetics, you focused on Autoota and the system being acted on, not just observed. So that's my opening.